My wife made me sign a prenup to protect her assets, but after I got promoted and inherited a small fortune, she demanded we dissolve it. What I found later were emails, proving she'd been planning this with lawyers for months, long before our fights ever began. My entire marriage, it turns out, was built on a business plan I never got to see. My wife Sarah and I have been together for 8 years, married for 5. When we first met, the dynamic was clear. I was a mid-level tech guy. My salary was fine. It paid the bills, but it was nothing to write home about. Sarah, on the other hand, was a force of nature, a rising star in the marketing world, a real go-getter with a 5-year plan and the ambition to make it happen. I didn't just love her, I was in awe of her. I fell for the fire in her eyes when she talked about her goals, a fire I felt could light up the world. So, when we got engaged, and she brought up a prenuptial agreement, it stung badly. It was a cold splash of reality on the perfect romantic fantasy I was living in. I remember sitting in her pristine, minimalist apartment as she laid it all out. Her reasoning was calm and logical, that it was for both our protections, but we both knew the score. It was for her protection. My assets at the time consisted of a used Honda Civic and some student loan debt. She had a growing investment portfolio and family money on the horizon. Imbalance was obvious. I can still picture the lawyer's stuffy wood-paneled office the day we signed it. He was an older man who didn't smile once, speaking in terms of asset allocation, an event of dissolution. The word dissolution echoed in the silent room, feeling so violent and sterile. This wasn't how I pictured the journey to marriage. But I looked at Sarah, and she gave me a small, reassuring nod. My love for her was bigger than my pride. I told myself that real love, real partnership, wasn't about pride. It was about trust, so I trusted her. I figured, we're never getting divorced, so what does this piece of paper even matter? After I signed my name, Sarah's face broke into a brilliant smile that instantly chased the gloom from the room. She leaned over, tapping the document with a perfectly manicured nail. "Consider this an investment in our future," she said, her eyes sparkling playfully. "I'm betting on you, you know. I see what you're capable of, even if you don't see it yet. Is paper just a formality for the before? I can't wait for the after." Her words were a balm to my bruised ego. At the time, I thought it was the most romantic vote of confidence I'd ever received. I wrapped my arms around her right there in the lawyer's office, feeling like the luckiest guy on the planet. Looking back on it now, I realized it wasn't a vote of confidence. It was her noting the terms of a bet where only she knew the real stakes. For 5 years, that document gathered dust in a safe deposit box, completely forgotten. We built a life. I helped her study for her GMATs when she considered getting an MBA. I talked her through job anxieties, and I was her biggest cheerleader at every turn. The prenup became a running joke between us. On the rare occasion we cleaned out our files. "Remember that silly thing?" She'd laugh. It was a relic from a lifetime ago, a testament to how far we'd come. Or so I believed. And then life changed. Dramatically, Sarah's bet paid off, big time, just not in the way she expected. My career took off. A risky software project I led for my company didn't just succeed. It blew up, becoming the new industry standard. I was promoted, then promoted again. I was bumped up to an executive position, with a salary that dwarfed our combined income from just a few years prior. The shift was subtle at first. Dinners were suddenly always on my card. When she talked about her job, there was a new, almost dismissive edge to it. I chalked it up to professional stress. I was a fool. I wasn't seeing stress. I was seeing a power shift she couldn't stand. On top of that, tragedy struck last year. I lost both of my parents in a sudden car accident. The grief was an ocean, pulling me under. My mom's laughter, my dad's terrible jokes, it was all gone in an instant. In the haze of funeral arrangements, I told Sarah about the inheritance, my voice cracking. Her reaction is seared into my memory. She hugged me, but her embrace felt performative. Over my shoulder, her eyes were wide with a spark that had nothing to do with empathy. It was calculation. "Oh, honey," she whispered, her hand patting my back in a mechanical rhythm. That's a cushion, a real one for us." Just a few hours later, I was sitting on the couch, lost in old family photos, when I saw Sarah scrolling on her phone. Zillow. Listings for houses in North Hills, an affluent neighborhood we'd never even joked about. My voice was quiet when I asked what you're looking at. She jumped, locking her phone instantly. "Oh, nothing, honey. just daydreaming, trying to think of something happy to distract you." She smiled, but it was brittle. It was the first time my wife had ever felt like a stranger to me. A few weeks went by in a kind of cold silence. She was being unusually attentive, making my favorite meals, suggesting date nights. She was setting a stage. And then, one Tuesday night, she made her move. She made a fancy dinner, lit candles, opened a nice bottle of wine. After we finished eating, she took my hands across the table, her expression impossibly earnest. "Honey, I've been thinking so much," she began, her voice soft. "About us, about our future, about a family." My heart clenched. "It was the conversation we'd been having for years," she continued. "You know, my biological clock isn't getting any younger. And I want to start our IVF journey with you. I want to have a baby with you more than anything in the world." A wave of warmth washed over me, a welcome tide against the cold grief I'd been living in. This is what I wanted too, a new beginning. "Of course, Sarah. Me too," I said. She smiled, but it was a fragile thing. "But there's one thing, honey. One thing that's holding me back, like a knot in my stomach." She squeezed my hands tighter. "I don't want to start that sacred journey with a cold piece of paper sitting between us that says we don't fully trust each other. The prenup. It feels like a spiritual block, you understand?" My stomach dropped. The warm tide receded, leaving me cold and exposed. I could see the train coming down the tracks. "Sarah," I started, trying to keep my voice even. "You were the one who insisted on it. You said it was for protection." Tears immediately welled in her eyes, and I was wrong. I was young and scared. I was protecting things. I didn't realize then what truly needed protection was us. Our connection. Our future family. "Don't you see?" She leaned forward, her voice a passionate whisper. "Tearing up that paper isn't about money. It's about tearing down the last wall between us so we can be whole." For our baby, her words were perfect. A beautifully crafted argument wrapped in the dream of a family I'd always wanted. They were also the loudest alarm bells I had ever heard in my life. She was asking me to tear down a wall she had insisted on building, and she was using our future child as the leverage. As I looked into her earnest, pleading, tear-filled eyes, I couldn't shake one terrifying question. Was this a plea for unity, or was it the most calculated move she had ever made? Her question hung in the air of our candlelit dining room, thick and heavy like smoke. Was this a plea for unity, or was it the most calculated move she had ever made? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. In that moment, two versions of my wife sat before me. There was Sarah, the woman I loved, the woman who wanted to build a family with me, her eyes shimmering with earnest tears. And then there was this other person, a strategist looking at me from across a chessboard, having just put my king in check. I didn't know which one was real. "Sarah, that's a huge thing to ask," I finally managed to say, my voice raspy. I need to think about it." The light in her eyes flickered, replaced by a flash of disappointment so quick I almost missed it. But she recovered instantly, her face softening into a look of patient understanding. "Of course, honey. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know what's in my heart." She got up, walked around the table, and kissed the top of my head. It was meant to be a gesture of affection, but it felt like a dismissal. The conversation was over. She had made her move, and now she would wait for my response. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. On the surface, everything was normal. We went to work, we made dinner, we watched TV, but underneath, the tension was suffocating. I felt like I was living with a ghost. Beautiful, charming ghost whose true intentions were a complete mystery to me. I started watching her, really watching her, for the first time in years. I noticed how her smile never quite reached her eyes anymore, unless she was on the phone. I noticed how she'd angle her laptop away from me when I walked into the room. Harmless, everyday actions that now felt like clues in a mystery I was desperate to solve. Sleep became a luxury. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying her IVF proposal over and over in my head. It was brilliant. Utterly, cruelly brilliant. She had woven her request into the very fabric of our shared dreams, making it impossible to reject without looking like a monster. If I said no, I wasn't just rejecting a financial request. I was rejecting her, rejecting motherhood, rejecting our future. I was the selfish husband prioritizing his inheritance over his wife's deepest desire. The narrative was perfect. That's what scared me the most. It felt scripted. I felt a profound sense of guilt for my suspicion. This was the woman I had vowed to love and trust. But my gut, a primal instinct I'd learned to rely on in my career, was screaming at me that something was deeply wrong. The timing was too perfect. The argument was too emotionally manipulative. The sweet woman I married didn't make calculated moves. But the successful marketing executive, she did it for a living. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning about a week later. Sarah was packing for a 2-day business trip to Chicago. I was in our home office trying to sort through some lingering paperwork for my parents' estate when she popped her head in. "Hey, honey, could you be a doll and grab my blue portfolio from the shelf? It's in my work bag. I need it for the conference," she said, already distracted by a call buzzing on her phone. "Sure thing," I replied. Her work bag, a stylish leather briefcase, was on the floor by her desk. I opened it up and saw the blue portfolio she mentioned. But underneath it was another folder, a thick beige one with a neatly printed label on the front. It read, "Future Project." It was a generic, corporate-sounding name. It could have been anything, a new marketing campaign, a side hustle. But in my state of high alert, those 2 words sent a jolt of electricity down my spine. My heart started hammering against my ribs. "Don't open it," a voice in my head screamed. "It's her private stuff. You're crossing a line." But a louder, more desperate voice whispered, "You need to know." My hands trembled as I pulled the folder out. It felt heavier than it should have. I placed it on her desk and opened the cover. The first thing I saw was a business card clipped to the top of the page. It wasn't for a marketing consultant or a graphic designer, it was for a lawyer, a name I recognized from a billboard on the highway. She wasn't just any lawyer. She was a shark, the most ruthless, high-profile divorce attorney in the city. My breath caught in my throat. I felt dizzy, like the room was tilting. I forced myself to look at the next page. It was a printout of a spreadsheet, a net worth analysis. There were 3 main columns: Mark's assets, Sarah's assets, and a third column, highlighted in fluorescent yellow, titled Combined Assets Post-Dissolution of Prenup. My inheritance was listed right there, a neat $150,000, already absorbed into the combined column. But it was the handwritten notes in the margins that made me physically sick. Scrawled in Sarah's elegant cursive were phrases like, "Potential alimony scenarios, inheritance legally separate or marital asset post-merger." And then I saw it. It's a note that connected everything. Next to the IVF discussion points, she had written, leverage, biological clock, family planning. Leverage, it wasn't a dream, it wasn't a plea, it was leverage. What? The word knocked the wind out of me. I sank into her desk chair, the folder open in my lap, the cold, hard proof of a betrayal so deep and calculated it felt unreal. This wasn't a recent development. The dates on the documents, the email printouts from the lawyer stuffed in the back of the folder, this had been going on for months. Long before my promotion, the planning had started shortly after my parents died. She had seen my grief not as a wound to be healed, but as an opportunity to be exploited. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring. When I finally heard her footsteps approaching, I calmly closed the folder, placed it back in her bag under the blue portfolio, and walked out of the office, my heart a frozen stone in my chest. I handed her the portfolio she'd asked for.
"Here you go."
"Have a safe trip," I said, my voice eerily calm. If she noticed the dead look in my eyes, she didn't show it. The next 2 days were a blur. I walked through my life like a zombie, my mind replaying the contents of that folder on a loop. When she came home Sunday night, full of smiles and stories about her trip, I waited. I let her unpack. I let her settle in. Then, when she was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine, I walked over to her briefcase, took out the Future Project folder, and placed it silently on the marble island between us. Looked at the folder, then at my face. Her smile evaporated. "What is this?" she asked, her voice a little too high-pitched. "You tell me," I said quietly. "It's your project." She stared at me, her mind racing, searching for an angle. I expected her to panic, to cry, to deny. She did none of those things. After a long, tense silence, she took a deep breath, her expression shifting from surprise to a look of profound, almost theatrical hurt, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. "You went through my bag," she said, her voice laced with disappointment. I opened the folder, Sarah. She opened it, glanced at the contents as if seeing them for the first time, and then looked back at me. Her eyes were steady. "Okay," she said, her voice now calm and measured. "I know how this looks, but you're not seeing the whole picture." I just stared, waiting. "Mark, my biggest fear in this world is losing you," she began, her voice dripping with sincerity. "When you got that promotion, when you got the inheritance, I was so proud, but I was also terrified. Everything was changing so fast. I started to feel insecure. So yes, I contacted a lawyer. I did it to understand the worst-case scenario. I needed to see what a messy, horrible divorce could look like, on paper, to remind myself of how critical it is that we do everything in our power to avoid it. This," she said, gesturing to the folder, "this is my motivation to make us stronger. The IVF, dissolving the prenup. That's the path away from this nightmare scenario. I was trying to protect us, don't you see? I was mapping out the dangers so I could steer our marriage safely away from them." I was stunned into silence. It was a masterful performance. She had taken my irrefutable evidence of her betrayal and reframed it as an act of profound love and foresight. She was turning her scheme into a shield, and in the process, she was painting my discovery, my snooping, as the real transgression. She was making me the villain of the story. I didn't know what to say. My mind was reeling, trying to process the sheer audacity of her explanation. It was so logical, so twistedly plausible, that it made me question my own sanity. The standoff ended with me walking away, needing space. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Sarah's younger sister, Jessica. "Hey, Mark, it's Jess," she said, her voice filled with a warm, sisterly concern. "Listen, Sarah called me. She was a complete wreck. She told me you found some of her research. I repeated, the word tasting like acid. "Look, I know my sister," Jessica continued, her tone gentle and persuasive. "She gets anxious. She overplans for everything. It's how she's wired. When she gets an idea in her head, she follows every single rabbit hole to the very end. This IVF thing means the world to her, and she's just terrified of anything messing it up. She sees that prenup as a final hurdle to feeling totally, completely secure with you. Please don't mistake her anxiety for something malicious. She loves you more than anything. You're a great guy, Mark. Just be the bigger person here for her." I hung up the phone, my head spinning. It was a coordinated attack. A pincer move. Sarah had provided the sophisticated logical defense, and her sister had just delivered the emotional plea. They were working together, boxing me in, using my own decency and love for my wife as weapons against me. I was completely and utterly alone in this, trapped in a maze of manipulation so complex, I no longer knew which way was up. I was trapped. Almost plausible explanation for the folder, followed by her sister's concerned, gentle phone call had done their job perfectly. They had created just enough doubt in my mind to paralyze me. My gut was still screaming that I was being played, but my heart, my exhausted, grief-stricken heart, desperately wanted to believe I was wrong. It would be so much easier to be the bigger person, to accept her story and move on, than to face the terrifying alternative that my marriage was a lie. I did nothing. I existed in a state of emotional limbo for another week. The future project folder was a ghost that sat between us at the dinner table, an unspoken accusation that poisoned the air. The tension was unbearable. I was distant, and Sarah was a portrait of wounded patience, treating me with a gentle kindness that felt more suffocating than any argument would have. Then, one evening, I came home from work, and something was different. The house was filled with the smell of my favorite meal, garlic and rosemary roast chicken. The lights were dimmed, and soft music was playing. Sarah met me at the door, not with her usual strained smile, but with red, puffy eyes. "We need to talk," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She led me to the living room. On the coffee table, spread open, was our wedding album. She sat me down on the couch and knelt on the floor in front of me, taking my hands in hers. Tears were streaming down her face. "I've been a fool, Mark," she started, her voice breaking. a complete and utter insecure fool. She told me that the past week had been agony for her, seeing the doubt in my eyes. She confessed that her sister's call had been a mistake, an overstep that she regretted. She said that her explanation for the folder, while technically true, had been a defense mechanism. The real truth, she said, was much simpler. I got scared, she sobbed, clutching my hands. I saw you becoming so successful, so powerful, and I felt myself getting smaller. I felt like I was losing you. And my anxiety, my stupid over-planning brain, went into overdrive. I did all that ... research because I was trying to control a future I was terrified of. It was never about the money. It was about my fear. She looked up at me, her face a mask of raw regret. I don't need the money, Mark. I was wrong. I was so stupidly and securely wrong. I just need you. Just need us to be us again. She let go of my hands and reached for something on the end table. It was an old photo album, the one from our first few years together. Our trip to the Grand Canyon. The goofy pictures from our first apartment. Us, younger, happier, without the weight of money and secrets between us. This is what I want back, she said, her voice barely audible. Before all the success, before the inheritance, before my fear messed everything up. Please, Mark, can we find our way back to this? I'll go to therapy. We can go to couples counseling. I will do whatever it takes. Just please, don't give up on me. Don't give up on us. Every word was a perfectly aimed arrow, striking right at the heart of my deepest desire. For all of this to just be a horrible misunderstanding. Watching her cry, seeing our history laid out before me in those happy, smiling photos, the walls I had built around my heart began to crumble. The relief was intoxicating. It washed over me, a warm, healing wave. Maybe my gut was wrong. Maybe this was just a woman who was scared and had made a series of terrible, misguided mistakes. Maybe we could fix this. Okay, I said, my own voice thick with emotion I didn't know was there. Okay, Sarah, we can try. The change was instantaneous. It was like a light had been switched back on in our lives. The tension that had plagued our house for weeks vanished. We talked for hours that night, really talked for the first time in forever. We were open, vulnerable. We made plans. We booked our first session with a marriage counselor for the following week. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. I slept soundly that night, a deep, dreamless sleep, feeling like I had gotten my wife back. The next day, Saturday, we were a team again. As part of our fresh start, we decided to tackle a project we'd been putting off for ages, organizing our shared digital life. We had an old, massive, external hard drive where we dumped years of files, old photos, documents, music, everything. The plan was to sort through it, declutter, and start anew. It felt symbolic. I plugged the hard drive into my computer, and we sat side by side at my desk, laughing at old pixelated photos and cringing at our taste in music from a decade ago. It felt normal. It felt good. After a while, Sarah went to make us some coffee. I kept clicking through the folders, a genuine smile on my face, and then I saw it. A folder I didn't recognize. It was buried deep in an old backup directory. The folder name was simple, innocuous, 5-year plan. My curiosity was casual at first. I figured it was some old career goal she'd set for herself. I double-clicked. The folder was password protected. Small knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I tried a few common passwords. Our anniversary, her birthday. Nothing then, on a whim. I typed in her mother's birthday. The folder opened. My blood ran cold. It contained only 2 files. One was a series of email exchanges. The other was an Excel spreadsheet. I clicked on the emails first. They were between Sarah and the same divorce attorney, but these were different. The dates, they were from 3 years ago. Months before my parents had passed away, long before my big promotion. In them, she was asking hypothetical questions about asset division, specifically regarding potential future windfalls, such as inheritance. My hands started to shake. This wasn't a recent anxiety. This was a long-term contingency plan. Then, with a sense of dread so profound it felt like I was falling, I opened the spreadsheet. The file name was Partner Analysis V1.0. The date-created stamp in the file properties made the world stop. It was from 9 years ago, 6 months before we even got engaged. It was a full workup. On me, my life, reduced to a series of cells and formulas. It listed my job, my salary at the time, and my education. It had a column for current assets, under which she had typed, low, negligible. It had a column for debt, under which she'd written, none significant advantage. And then I saw the column that explained everything. Column that reframed our entire life together into a cold, brutal transaction. It was labeled, future income potential. Next to it, she had written, very high-tech sector. High-value skill set. But it was the notes section at the bottom that shattered what was left of my heart into a million pieces. It read, initial prenup required to establish security and protect existing assets. Reevaluate after 5 to 7 years once shared marital assets from PI's partner's income have significantly accumulated. The primary goal is long-term financial security. Emotional connection is stable. Partner is supportive and non-confrontational, making him a suitable long-term candidate. I read it once, then twice. My brain struggled to process the words. Partner, candidate. Primary goal is long-term financial security. I wasn't her husband. I was a candidate. I wasn't her partner in life. I was P in a formula. Our love, our life, our history, it was all just a variable in a 7-year plan. The photo album from our first trip was still sitting on the coffee table in the other room, prop in the most convincing performance of my life. She hadn't been scared of losing me. She had been scared of losing her investment. The hope I'd felt just an hour ago now seemed like a cruel joke. It was a false summit designed to make this final, horrifying fall even more painful. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the computer, the only sound in the room, and I felt nothing but a profound, chilling emptiness. I finally had the truth. Not the story she wanted me to believe, but the cold, hard data. I knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The hum of the hard drive was the only sound in the world. I sat there, bathed in the cold blue light of the monitor, looking at the spreadsheet that had just systematically dismantled my life. Partner analysis, V1.0. It felt like an autopsy report for a marriage that had been dead for 9 years. I was just now getting the news. Every laugh, every anniversary, every shared dream was now tainted, reframed as a milestone in her long-term financial plan. The warmth of the hope I'd have felt just an hour ago had been replaced by an Arctic coldness. It was the chilling, profound emptiness of betrayal. I heard the cheerful clink of coffee mugs from the kitchen. I made you a latte just how you like it, Sarah called out. Her voice bright and full of the manufactured warmth of our fresh start. She walked into the office, a happy domestic vision, with 2 steaming mugs in her hands. She placed one on the desk beside me. Find anything else fun in there? She asked with a genuine-looking smile, gesturing towards the screen. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at her. I simply, slowly, turned the laptop so the screen was facing her directly. I watched her face as she processed what she was seeing. First, there was confusion, a slight tilt of her head. Then, recognition. The smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a waxy pale mask. Her eyes, wide with horror, darted from the spreadsheet title to the creation date, to the damning words in the notes section. The coffee mug in her hand trembled, rattling softly against its saucer. The performance was over. The strategist had been exposed, her entire 9-year operation laid bare on the screen. Mark, ... she whispered, her voice a thread of sound. I can explain. Can you? I asked, my own voice devoid of any emotion. It was flat, dead. Can you explain away a 9-year-old business plan? Can you explain partner analysis? Can you explain being called a suitable long-term candidate? It was just a stupid thing I did when I was young. It doesn't mean anything, she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. The tears started again, but this time I felt nothing. I was immune. I'd seen the source code of her emotions, and I knew they were just part of a script. I stood up slowly, my joints feeling stiff and old. All of it. The prenup wasn't about protecting you. It was step 1, my promotion and the inheritance. That just moved up your timeline for step 2, dissolve the agreement and absorb the assets. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, I saw a stranger. A very capable, intelligent stranger who had been my roommate, my co-signer, but never my wife. It was never about the prenup, was it? I continued, the pieces clicking into place with cold, hard clarity. It was about the timeline, my future income potential. I wasn't your husband, Sarah. I was your 7-year plan. And I guess I should be flattered. Your investment paid off? She just stood there, speechless, the tears now flowing freely, but they had lost all their power. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The game was over. She had no more moves to make. I'm done, I said. It was that simple. 2 words to end an 8-year relationship. I'm leaving. I walked past her, out of the office, and into our bedroom. I pulled a duffel bag from the top of the closet and started methodically pulling clothes from drawers, t-shirts, socks, jeans. Each item I packed felt like a final, definitive action. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage had burned out, leaving behind only the ashes of what I thought we had. Instead, I felt a strange, profound sense of clarity. The confusion and doubt that had tormented me for weeks were gone, replaced by the terrible, liberating certainty of the truth. Sarah followed me into the bedroom, her pleas becoming more frantic. She begged, she bargained, she promised she'd delete the file, that she'd do anything, sign anything, to prove she loved me. But it was like listening to a salesperson trying to save a deal after the customer has already walked out the door. Our words were hollow, meaningless. The woman I married never existed, Sarah, I said, zipping up my bag without looking at her. She was a projection, character you played, and you played her well. I'll give you that. I walked out of the bedroom and headed for the front door. She blocked my path, her hands on my chest. Please, Mark, don't do this. I love you. No, you don't, I said, gently removing her hands. You loved my potential. There's a difference. Leaving that house was the hardest and easiest thing I have ever done. The life I was walking away from was a beautiful, comfortable lie. And as I closed the door behind me, I felt a wave of both heartbreaking loss and an incredible, unexpected relief. The weight of the deception was lifted. I could finally breathe again. The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers and paperwork. I hired my own attorney, a sharp woman who took one look at my evidence and assured me my inheritance was secure. Sarah's lawyers tried to fight, but the spreadsheet, it's a document created before our relationship was even official, was a smoking gun they couldn't argue against. It was proof of intent. I was proof of a long con. I did something else, too. I took the $150,000 my parents left me, the money that had inadvertently triggered the collapse of my marriage, and I met with a financial planner. I used it to create a trust. It's an irrevocable trust, legally shielded and protected. It's not for me. It's for the future child I still hope to have one day. A child who will be born into a family built on actual love, not on a risk-benefit analysis. It was a symbolic act. I was taking the asset Sarah had coveted and turning it into a foundation for a future she would have no part in. I was taking back control of my own narrative. I don't hate her. I don't think I have the energy to. What I feel is a deep, profound pity. She spent almost a decade of her life executing a plan for financial security. And in the end, she's lost everything that truly matters. I'm heartbroken, yes, but I'm not broken. This experience has left a scar, but it has also taught me a brutal lesson about the difference between a partner and a candidate. And as I start to build my new life, a life based on truth, I know it's a lesson I will never forget.